was very inspiring. You know, freedom's cause without immigrants is like a revolution without music, so it's going to be very boring. Thank you, San Jose. I remember San Jose for a very peculiar reason. 35 years ago, somewhere around that time, I got my first speeding ticket in America. Right here in San Jose. And referring to what Emma was saying, I actually enjoyed that moment because that was the first time out of China I actually could go to American court to defend myself. I knew at the time it's a lost cause, but I enjoyed the right. So that's San Jose, and then also I remember before I left the Bay Area after getting my PhD, I left for Annapolis, Maryland to become a faculty and professor at the United States Naval Academy in 1994. One of the last things I did was to help a friend of mine who's a professor at the San Jose State University to move into a new house. He spent $330,000 that was very expensive to him. He told me the other day his house now is worth $2.7 million. So that's a very important thing. Now, I have prepared a speech, but in the interest of time, so I'm going to basically cut down some of the stuff and just read some of the relevant things over there. And thank you for the warm welcome, and I very much appreciate it. And I appreciate it all the more because, honestly, I never expected to be in front of the big audience like this, giving remarks on a Sunday afternoon. I'm sure that the policy wonk isn't your type of guest either, but you made me feel right at home, so thank you. When I speak publicly at the events like this, it's normally a part of my job as a professor. Being at a church makes me feel, think of the advice I also give to my students, and that advice is in order for something to be immortal, it doesn't have to be eternal. I'll start with some background. I came, like many of you, I'm an immigrant. I was born in a remote area in Anhui province in eastern China. I grew up in Chongqing during the Cultural Revolution. My son was born in the USA, and I often tell him stories about what life was like then. But it's hard for someone who's only known American freedom to understand. When I was a little older, I came to the US for college, and in the late 1980s and early 1990s, I spent 7 wonderful years in East Bay at the institution called the University of California at Berkeley, getting my PhD. Thank you. I don't know if you're supporting my PhD or the University of California at Berkeley. That was a very nice gesture. A lot of immigrants have trouble answering this seemingly simple, but quite difficult question as to where you're from. Questions of where you're from is because I've lived in a different country and in different states over the several decades in the United States. But I always say that I'm from around here in the Bay Area. That's because I truly discovered myself and what I value during my time here. People joke that where I went to school is so woke that it's basically the People's Republic of Berkeley. But Berkeley taught a student from the People's Republic of China about freedom and how precious it is. There are 2 crucial moments I'd like to share with you that give me that epiphany. Those moments help guide my teaching, my work at the State Department, and what I do today. The first came on June 3rd, 1989. In Beijing, it was already June 4th. Many of you know that date. You know it because of Tiananmen Square. At the time, I was on an American campus where we value human life, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and the truth. What I witnessed, the Chinese Communist Party government slaughtering anyone who represents the hope of a free and a democratic China. The man responsible was the West's favorite communist dictator, the so-called reformer, Deng Xiaoping. You know, Pat Buchanan had a very different name for him that I like very much. Buchanan called Deng Xiaoping a chain-smoking communist dwarf. To me, the massacre meant the end of illusions about the Chinese communists or its phony reforms. At Berkeley, I stopped thinking that there was any moral ambiguity about the CCP. I also stopped thinking about any moral ambiguity in the United States. Here, I saw Americans, whether they were born in this country, in China, or anywhere else, living side by side as equals, prosperous and peaceful. I decided that this is home. I've never looked back or changed my mind since. The second moment came a year later on July 20, 1990. That was the day I flew back from Warsaw, Poland. The Iron Curtain was coming down. The Polish anti-communists had won. The Solidarity Party's Tadeusz Mazowiecki became their first democratically elected prime minister. He had invited activists to go to Warsaw to exchange views and map out the pro-democracy movement's future. I was lucky enough to join and to represent Chinese students from the United States. I had grown up under communism, but I then got to see the first days of what life would be like for people who were leaving behind it, who were leaving it behind. It was really amazing to witness. But the moment came after the conference. Sitting next to me on the plane back was the retired American professor. He kept lamenting the fall of communism and how much he disliked the United States, his own country. Now, we say he was woke. I can't remember if I was in a window or an aisle seat, but I couldn't get away, so I argued with him. I defended the freedom and the United States and cheered the downfall of communism in Europe. It's hard for someone like this professor who's only known American freedom to understand what that event meant. I pitied him, both for his ignorance and for his intellectual dishonesty. But that was not the end of the story. When we walked off the plane, the professor went through the fast lane for the customs, marked for the US citizens. I had to join the line for foreigners. And that was a tremendous blow to me. My feeling wasn't about the line, it's about the way of life. That was the moment I decided, July 20, 1990, that as an immigrant who loved the US, what it stands for, I must become a citizen and have an American passport. Again, it's not about tribal convenience. I wanted to be able to go anywhere in the world and for anyone to know that I am an American. And that means something very special to me. I wanted to devote my energy to this country and make sure that this nation does not fall into the hands of people like that self-loathing professor. Those two moments were possible because of my time here in the Bay Area. You all care about the relationship between the United States and China. Many of you still have families there. You should know who's responsible for the worsening of that relationship. It wasn't the Trump administration. It wasn't Secretary Pompeo. And it wasn't any of the so-called China hawks, not even me. Hawks and doves come and go in Washington, but the very existence of the free United States is seen as an existential threat by the CCP. We saw this a few months ago in Anchorage, Alaska. Politburo member Yang Jiechi and his subordinate Wang Yi lectured America's current Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. They didn't focus on specific policies. They lambasted and blasted the entire American democratic system as inferior to China's Marxist, Leninist, communist system. That kind of Cold War rhetoric is right out of the debate between Soviet leader Khrushchev and Richard Nixon in Moscow back in the 1950s. Today's Blame America First crowd says the Trump administration is responsible for worsening relationships. They are ignoring reality. I'll close my remarks with one thought. I recently attended a meeting where a former senior official in the Obama administration said that under the Trump administration, we had a China attitude, not a China policy. That's not true. We had a China policy with an American attitude based on American values. We had a moral clarity, straight talk, confidence, and deep beliefs in American exceptionalism and every human being's unalienable rights. That was because of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. No communist would have gotten away with lecturing him. As a Chinese-American citizen, it was an honor to work in the US State Department, helping shaping our China policy. It was an honor to make the case for freedom and democracy, causes that people like MRN, groups like the Hong Kong Freedom Beacon, and patriots like you all believe in so deeply. And it was an honor every time I touched down in a new country to pull out my American diplomatic passport and to walk alongside America's top diplomat. Working at the State Department, I remember the two moments I talked about earlier. I thought about how, even if I was born somewhere else, this is the place where I'm from, America's home. For the honor this country has given me, all I can say is 谢谢. And today, I have the great honor, I am now honored. I'm proud to introduce the man who led every initiative I just described and under whom I served, Mike Pompeo.